Hello and welcome. I want to welcome you to this edition of Westford Area Real Estate, the podcast. And today I have with me Allie from our Coldwell Banker office. Allison McIntyre is our manager, and I've invited her here because we have kind of an interesting thing that we are keeping up with or trying to keep up with as far as commissions are concerned. And today, Allie is going to update us as to why we're here, where we are. And Allie, I've heard crazy things from there are going to be no more commissions to sell houses to nothing's going to change. And we know it's not either of those. We know it's somewhere in the middle. So can you help us understand what's going on, maybe why it's going on?
Sure.
And just have a conversation about that.
Absolutely. So everyone's kind of been listening in to what's happening with our, major lawsuit with NAR. So the Sizer Burnett case.
And NAR is National Association of Realtors.
Correct. And basically they've had a very large settlement in this class action lawsuit. And it was essentially found that sellers were no longer going to have to offer publicly compensation in our MLS. Not to say that sellers have ever had the ability to not negotiate a commission to a buyer's agent or to a seller's agent. They always have, and that will continue to be the case. However, based on what we know right now, it's not going to be advertised to a buyer's agent, seller's compensation to a buyer's agent from in the public format in our MLS.
Yes.
Correct. And that being said, buyer's agents have always had the ability to negotiate compensation from their clients directly. I think a common misconception and listening to the media and how they it's the media, so they like to scare people. They like to dramatize certain outcomes and honestly don't spit out the truth most of the time.
Agreed.
So that's what we're here to do, is kind of clarify that.
Right.
But as far as buyers' agencies concerned, buyers essentially have always paid their agents. A lot of agents, especially newer agents to the business, may not have been educated properly or explained to their clients what exclusive buyer agency means. And ultimately, the ones who are bringing the cash to the table, Cheryl, are the buyers. So that's where the money comes from to pay their agent.
Right. From the proceeds of the sale to pay both sides, actually.
Correct. So buyers have always paid. But when it comes down to it, you want to think about the expertise that a realtor or real estate agent has to their clients, both on the listing side and on the buy side, the purchase side. And I don't know about you, but I definitely wouldn't want to, go have surgery performed by an unlicensed surgeon. That to me would be a little bit scary. And I think the same goes for navigating one of the largest purchases an individual is going to make in their lifetime. And honestly, the most significant investment to help them build wealth over their life. So there's a lot of steps involved in purchasing a home and selling a home. And that's why people lean heavily on licensed professionals, licensed realtors for advice and to help them navigate this process and to work in their best interest.
Right. And not to just hook themselves up to someone who's really representing someone else, in this case, the seller.
Correct.
So you're on your own trying to navigate legal issues, financial issues, but you don't have representation.
Correct. And I think, listen, we've hit a lot of, I'll just call them roadblocks over the last couple of years. I mean, we went from 2.5% interest rates up to 7%. And so that kind of caused a hurdle for a lot of buyers because it decreased their purchasing power. But what we haven't seen is a decrease in sales price. And if anything, it's continued to climb higher and higher.
True.
So we're watching prices continuously climb and buyers' purchasing power being diminished slightly. And now with this change, all it really is doing is giving a different conversation to both buyers and sellers and helping them navigate, number one, what can they afford? But number two, what are they willing to do to win in this competitive marketplace? And most of them are going to be willing to pay a buyer's agent, including the sellers. I mean, it's another reason that sellers hire a professional. They want to, number one, get the best terms for their home. They want to get the most money for their home. And they want help, navigating that stressful process as well, and dealing with buyers' concerns. And a lot of sellers are going to still offer compensation. It's just the roadmap has changed a little bit. So what they're going to start to experience is buyers and buyers' agents writing those commissions and dealings to pay the buyer's agents into their offers.
Right.
They're going to be asking for seller concessions back. I mean, there's so many different ways to make this come together. And they might even ask the seller directly, which is what they will do, to pay for the compensation, because ultimately that's the buyer's agent working in the best interest if they've got an exclusive buyer agreement with their client to help them.
Right. And what I'm finding interesting with the conversation is there are so many different ways to make it happen.
Yes.
It can still happen the old-fashioned way where a seller just says, sure, I'll offer X% to the buyer's agent. Or it can be where, as you mentioned, it can be written into the offer. Or there's also conversation, which I find makes a lot of sense when buyers come to the table and they're really struggling with down payment and the mortgage payment. I have to come up with this too. So there's conversation about it being included in the financing.
Yeah, so financing is an interesting topic because buyers for years have included this type of exact concession into their purchase. The issue becomes with the purchase price and appraising, depending on how much a consumer is putting down on a home. One interesting kind of new fact that I learned recently, and it's not even new, it's just a rebranding of how people are going to hear this information, is for many years, consumers have taken out, home equity lines or HELOCs on their current homes to either bridge the gap to purchase a new home. And now we're starting to hear, well, why don't I take an equity line so I can pay my buyer's agent and make a competitive offer? Because ultimately it comes down to how can they best compete to purchase their new home. So there's that is definitely a piece of it as far as concessions are concerned as well, because most loan programs, depending on the program, whether it's FHA, whether it's conventional, there's some other ones. You can get seller concessions back anywhere from 3 to 9%. So that's plenty of, commission potential in there.
Right. More than enough.
Yeah, more than enough to cover that kind of gap. The other thing I would say is you might even see both sides contributing. So, for example, a purchaser may say, well, I'm going to agree to give my buyer's agent 2% commission, but I want my agent to basically go to work for me and get the seller to contribute as much as that 2%, if not all of it, as they can. So you might see a seller say, sure, I'll accept your offer, but I'm only willing to pay your buyer's agent 1%. And the buyer saying, great, I'll come up with the other 1% difference. So there's so many different combinations.
Right. And then another possibility, as I understand it, is the seller being asked to contribute to the commission. The buyer agent commission might come back and say the buyers offered 500, and I'm just spitballing numbers here because math is not my strong suit, and it's too early.
No worries.
But say the buyer agent is looking for, or the buyer is asking the seller to contribute $4,000 toward the buyer agent commission. The seller may say, "Fine, I will do that, but I want the purchase price to be $504."
Right.
So it would kind of go back to the way it was, and it would just end up being rolled into the financing.
Correct.
And I would expect that something like $4,000 probably isn't going to tank an appraisal.
No.
So that's another way that we can see it happening too. So there's
Absolutely.
so many different ways this can play out.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest piece of this conversation, Cheryl, is sellers and buyers have always had the opportunity to negotiate. This real estate's a giant negotiation.
True.
So now it's just a matter of how it's advertised.
Yeah.
And what's in the best interest of each party, what's in the best interest of the seller and then the buyer. So when it comes to the sellers, I think a lot of this is going to come down to their competition. And again, remaining competitive as the market continues to kind of shift and change. One major point, because I know, our time flies by here, is that nothing has changed yet. So yes, although this class action lawsuit has settled, those rules have not affected our local marketplace quite yet. Our multiple listing service is still trying to determine how we can shift these rules and what that's going to look like. And what we're hearing right now is that may not happen until July. It could be later than July. But nothing's been pen to paper, nothing's been inked. So that being said, it's not necessarily business as usual. It's having these conversations to alert people of their options and choosing what's in their best interest, depending on which side realtor is representing.
Right. And I think, I've been a realtor going on 38 years. I usually don't say that because it makes me sound like a fossil, but going on 38 years, and the changes I've seen.
Yeah.
It was a little paper book that came out every week from Central Middlesex. No internet. We went around with our Polaroid Instamatic and took our pictures and taped them on, got out our glue sticks. So, it was prehistoric times as far as all this technology is concerned. But I think the conversation, and I'm taking my entire buyer agency designation course again. I took it when buyer agency first came into practice. So I've learned a lot. And I think one of the benefits for the realtors and for the public is going to be that that realtors will be better informed and better able to have a conversation about the benefits of using a buyer agent.
Well, absolutely. And, I think there was such a feeding frenzy, over the last 5 years that we will see a lot of specifically probably buyer agents who heavily, that's most of their business, probably kind of drop off. But the buyer's agents that are in this and that are experts and they love what they're doing, it's all about education and it's about having those conversations, because buyer's agency is very, very important. And as far as I'm concerned, the fiduciary duties that come along when that relationship exists between a buyer client and a buyer's agent, they're going to work for you. The obedience, the loyalty, all of those pieces that realtors, the old car that everyone learns when they're taking their courses.
Right. And can we just pause a minute and share old car?
Sure.
Obedience, loyalty, help me. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, and
what's the R?
Responsibility?
Responsibility.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I usually miss one.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Yeah. Well, 38 years.
But, when a buyer thinks that they're going to get the best deal going straight to a listing agent,
it's tricky.
It's very difficult
it's Russian
because,
roulette is what
especially
it is.
with the changing
Yeah.
rules, it's not that a dual agency in that case really isn't existent. The seller's agent always works for the seller. That's who their loyalty always goes to. So when a buyer goes directly to a listing agent, if they didn't have a pre-existing relationship to that buyer, then they're not a dual agent. They're a seller's agent, and their loyalties to the seller. And so everything that they're doing is in the best interest of the seller in that case. So the buyer's really not absorbing any kind of benefit.
I know.
In fact, they're doing themselves a disservice, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. And when I work with a seller client and we're filling out the listing form, I always say, this is what I want you to check off, which is that you will not agree to dual agency. And I explain to them, it would be more money for me, but it's not a benefit to you.
No.
And my job is to do the best I can for my seller client in that situation, or my buyer client if I'm on the other side of it.
Right.
So it's going to open up a whole new level of education. And I know that with the different markets and the different things that happen, we see buyers, agents come in and think it's easy money, which it isn't. But sometimes they're easier than others. And then we see attrition when it gets so that they realize it's a job.
Correct.
And it's a hard job.
It's a very difficult job. And I think ultimately, as you said earlier, this industry, as many industries, they kind of ride these waves over years, right? Realtors aren't going anywhere. Real estate's not going anywhere. It's just another change that I think is going to make our industry better.
I agree.
It's going to make our industry stronger, and consumers and their agents are going to be more informed and more educated. And so I think the change, I think if you embrace the change, it's a good one. It's just continuing to learn and navigate the change as we learn more, because as you said, right now we don't have any other formal changes happening until we do, until probably later this year. It could be 4 to 6 months down the road. Right.
And that's true. We're at a point now where we know there will be change. We know what it might be, a couple of different iterations, but we don't have it down. And I know in this class that I'm taking, the accredited buyer representative, we were supposed to have an update from a Friday meeting. We were supposed to get that yesterday. And when we got on the class yesterday, he said, I don't have it.
Yeah.
Because they're still working on it.
Yep.
So it's TBD for a lot of us. So I think it's important to help people understand where we are, what we know, what we don't know at this point.
Right. And right now where we are is we're trying to work with the Department of Justice, so the DOJ, on what formal new regulations are going to be specific to Massachusetts MLS PIN. The biggest piece of this, National Association of Realtors lawsuit, this class action lawsuit, is it's not just changing in one metro, right? This is national. Right. So this change, when they've decided how it's going to look, will go into effect across the nation. So that's why this is taking so much thought and effort, because we do need to do what's best for our clients and our consumers, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
Exactly. Allie, this has been great. I can't believe that the time, it just flies by when we have these discussions. But I really hope that you'll come back.
Absolutely.
And we can have another discussion, because there is so much disinformation out there. And I think it's important to help people understand what we know and what we don't know at this point.
Right.
And there's a lot on both sides of that conversation.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So before I sign off, I do want to let you know that at the end of this program, there will be an end screen, and my contact information will be there. And I want to invite you to call me, text me, email me if you have any questions about this at all, because I want you to use me and my 38 years as a resource to help you understand. I'm here for you. So be sure to check that out and don't hesitate to be in touch with me. So I will sign off. Allison McIntyre, manager of our Westford Coldwell Banker branch office. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Cheryl Major. And signing off from Westford Area Real Estate, I want to thank you, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.